Welcome to CPSE's sponsored webinar, Accreditation, ISO, and Budget Victories from the Trenches, Real World Wins from Real Departments. Today's presenter is Tom Lewis, a business development analyst for emergency reporting and a longtime CPSE sponsor and provider of cloud-based fire and EMS records management software to over 6,700 public safety agencies worldwide. Tom retired as a battalion chief from the Green Valley Fire District in Arizona in 2013 after serving for 22 years. He has used emergency reporting since 2004 and has been part of the emergency reporting family since 2011, teaching throughout the United States and in South Korea, Japan, Germany, Italy, and Kuwait. He holds 2 associate degrees and graduated summa cum laude from Arizona State University with a Bachelor of Applied Science degree in Fire Service Management. He believes that in order to tell our department's story, we need high-quality, actionable data presented to our communities and decision makers in an easily understandable manner. He is an avid reader, loves classic and modern Mopar muscle cars, and has a soft spot for retired racing greyhounds. At the end of the webinar, please contact Emergency Reporting directly for additional information, and be sure to visit their booth at the 2020 Excellence Conference, March 3rd through 6th at the Caribe Royale and Convention Center in Orlando, Florida. Tom, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Cindy. Appreciate that. So welcome, everybody. I'm glad you're able to join us today for this presentation. And I'm going to run through a few slides here at the beginning, but today's presentation is going to be a celebration truly of wins from departments, customers of emergency reporting, and how they've been successful in improving either their ISO score, going towards accreditation, because we have one of our co-presenters here today is going for accreditation for the first time, and then some budget victories and other successes that they've encountered. So with that, a lot of what this conversation is going to be about today is what is data doing for you? And I truly believe that data serves the organization, not vice versa. And the analogy that I like to give is you go to a movie and the special effects are amazing, but the story is terrible. So you want, it's like that. If the data is there, okay, great. But how's it serving the organization? Do the special effects serve the story, or is the story there for the special effects? And so it's about the people, it's about the organization, and how you can make data work for you. And so we've got these success stories that we want to share with you with concrete examples, and specifically how emergency reporting has helped our customers be successful. And so, you know, we can take the easy path or we can go the hard way. And I think we all prefer in the fire service to take the easy path. Our jobs are hard enough as it is. That's me. 22 years in fire service, as Cindy mentioned, and that's just a quick introduction slide. And one of my long-term heroes and mentors in the fire service, you all are probably well aware of Chief Alan Brunacini, who we lost not too long ago. But one of his sayings is never stop learning from everyone. And so I could share with you my expertise with emergency reporting and experience in the fire service. But along the road here, you meet some friends and you connect with people that share a lot of your values, are passionate about what they do in their fire departments, and that's who we've got on with us today. So first off is Darren Keith. And Darren, go ahead and unmute yourself, and I'll do a quick introduction of you, and then you can jump in and just guide me through your deck here. And then if you wish me to transfer the screen to you, I'm happy to do that. But Darren has been in public safety since 1993. He is currently acting as a training officer at Rock Island Arsenal. And like a lot of smaller organizations, the people in that organization often wear multiple hats, and you can see that listed there. Darren, are you on?
I am. Good morning, Tom.
Hey, Darren, good morning. So tell us a little bit about Rock Island briefly, and then you can jump into how it's working for you in the example that you shared with me.
All right, so Rock Island Arsenal Fire Department is a fire department on an Army installation, actually located in the middle of the Mississippi River between Illinois and Iowa. We are considered Illinois. Our department is a 2-shift department. out of one station centrally located on the installation that's about a mile wide by 3 miles long. Most of our occupancies are manufacturing and office buildings. We do have some residential, about 85 residential occupancies on the installation. We do run, last year we ran 681 calls for calendar year 2018. We do run a lot of mutual aid calls to the cities, both in the Illinois and Iowa side. And we do run river responses with the neighboring agencies also. We are part of MABUS, if you've heard of that, if you're familiar with it in Illinois. We have a tech rescue team, hazmat, fire investigation, and we're just starting our peer support team for all the city departments in our area and ourselves.
Excellent. And so one of the things I want to mention just briefly is that we've got one of our presenters today is the Chief of the United States Marine Corps Fire and Emergency Services, what I would call a pretty large organization. Then we have a couple that are, like Darren, they're running, 1,000 calls a year. You don't have to be a 10,000 call a month department to be pursuing excellent or to be an excellent public safety agency for the communities that you serve. And both the Army and the Marine Corps under the DoD, they have some not pretty, but very high standards that they have to adhere to. And so Darren's going to share one of those examples with us pertaining to his training. Yeah,
so we've been with ER for, I believe, 5 years now. I've been in the training office for 3 at this time. About 2 years ago, a year ago or so, we had our higher headquarters inspection, which is comparable to ISO in the city language. One of the things the inspector talked to me about was tracking what training was not being completed by our personnel. I assign monthly trainings to our shift personnel. They're responsible for making sure that it's completed, the shift officers are. I was not following up on that to ensure everybody was receiving the training, or as many as possible. Our goal after that meeting was to try to get to at least 70% each month of our department completing the training during that month. I had no real way of tracking that without causing myself more paperwork that was not needed. I started digging around in emergency reporting and found what I felt was going to be the best way for me to track it easier. And by doing that, I'm using the JPR section of emergency reporting in the training section.
So Darren, you said you've improved to 90% plus of personnel completing monthly trainings. Prior to using that part of our training module, which we'll show here in the next slide, what would you say you guys were at roughly?
I would say we were roughly down around 50%.
So a substantial improvement.
Correct. And it basically came down to I was able to look easier at the program and look at the training and the personnel that were not completing the training, and I was able to follow up on it. I was giving myself an easier way of, going back and reiterating that the training needed to be completed.
All right, so show us how you're doing that.
So what I'm doing, I'm using the JPR part of the training section. And what I do is each month I build the training reports. I pre-build them for each of our shifts. So all they have to do is go in and put the date and the time and the personnel that attended the training and complete that training report. By then, what it does is it will change the completion status for each individual that was on that training report under the JPR as pending, and I go in and I finalize that, which marks it complete. So what I do is I build, each training's got a template. Within the JPRs, you build your JPR using those templates. So it's looking for those templates in the training reports. And then it will mark the individuals as pending if they have completed it. And then what I'm able to do is I can go back and I can run a report 1688, and it will show me the completion status. I can break it down by which JPR, by the month, by the JPR, or the whole year. I can break it down by individuals in that report. And here's an example of that JPR, and it shows you each time that they completed that JPR. So in July 2019, that particular training, that individual actually completed it 3 times. And actually, I believe one was back in April that he did it. So he did it twice in the month of July. So it allows me to track who's completing it and who's not. And I can go back to the shift officers and say, hey, these individuals have not completed this class yet. You got a couple weeks left before the month's up. You need to try to get it done. Obviously, there's instances where individuals are not going to get it completed due to vacation time, sick time, military leave, incidents like that. We allow that. That falls into the percentage of not completed that we're going to allow for, so to speak. And then, you're going to have trainings that are mandatory trainings that it has to be completed. That maybe it's got to be completed within the year. You set your time frame that you want it to be looking for that JPR, that template to be used throughout the year, and you can track that also and make sure it's completed throughout the year.
A couple things here that to support what Darren is saying in the system, you'll notice that Robert here it's one of one, but it's showing 3. This sometimes confuses people, and like Darren said, he may have worked an overtime shift. They may have conducted the same training on his crew multiple times during this time period, and so the system will show you those multiple occurrences, but all he had to do was complete it at least one time during the given time period allotted, whether it's monthly or annually. And this allows you to track that without having to spend so much time researching training reports or running a half a dozen other reports to compare and contrast where they're at. And so Darren's taken advantage of that part of our system to better manage required training for his Army facility there at Rock Island Arsenal. So good stuff. Anything else you'd like to add, Darren?
Not at this time. I don't believe so.
Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Darren, for sharing that best practice example, and keep doing a great job there at Rock Island Arsenal with managing all that you have to do. So, all right, next up, we're going to travel a little further south now into sunny Florida. We've got Lieutenant Rich Lower. He's a paramedic. He's also the Accreditation Manager, and that probably should flip those two, because when you become the Accreditation Manager for your organization, it's a huge undertaking. Rich also has earned a Bachelor's of Arts, and I'm going to pass it over to him, and we're going to look at the slides, and then I know he wants to share his screen and show some examples. So tell us a little bit about Mount Dora.
All right, everybody. My name is Rich Lower. I'm fairly new to the accreditation world. I've been the accreditation manager for Mount Dora for about a year, and we're a candidate agency. So I just recently submitted our documents, and I've met Tom a couple of years ago at FDIC, and we've met up a couple of times since then at both FDIC and Fire Rescue International. Like I said, I'm from Mount Dora Fire Department. We're just northeast of Orlando, so we're about a half hour away from Disney. Florida's a really growing place, and so us being about half hour, 45 minutes away, we've seen a tremendous amount of growth. We've been pretty fortunate being able to go through the accreditation process without even being accredited yet, fingers crossed, come March. We've already seen a lot of really good benefits from what we've done and how emergency reporting has been able to help us with that, primarily in realizing our response times and effective response force mapping. Last year we got SAFER grant to hire 12 firefighters and put a 3rd unit in service. And I'll go through it a little bit, but went through the OVAP score, which is our risk assessment methodology. And we're one of those small town USA kind of places where we have a pretty big downtown district with a lot of little shops. And that's near and dear to a lot of people's hearts. So we've been very fortunate to have a lot of community support with the fire department, and I know that's not seen a lot. So between having a lot of community support and growing very rapidly, we've seen a lot of benefits from this process. So like I said, we have 2 fire stations right now. We run about 4,600 calls a year. And again, through this process of a lot of growth and community support, especially through the strategic planning process, and having extended response times, we're 2 stations right now. This last year we got approved to replace our two current stations, one of which is just kind of old and the other is in a terrible location and is a double wide manufactured home. So we're able to replace those two stations, move them to better locations, and then add a third fire station due to a lot of growth we're seeing with the Beltway coming from Orlando. So again, with response times and effective response force and risk assessment stuff, we've seen a lot of benefits there. So what I wanted to talk a lot about is Category 2 assessment and planning, and how that's really helped us primarily with our performance monitoring methodologies. So going into the next slide a little bit, 2A and 2B, we're talking about documentation of area characteristics and risk assessment and categorization. So for a small department, we've been with emergency reporting for about 2.5 years now. We're one of 14 departments in Lake County that purchased emergency reporting at the same time. We're under countywide CAD dispatch, and it's been a pretty slow process of building and working with the other departments, especially with data sharing. We're all pretty small departments, 2-3 station departments that have a lot of automatic and mutual aid agreements with each other, closest unit agreements. So it's been a good obstacle to overcome, but we've been trying to get through that. So getting on the Category 2A documentation of area characteristics, one of the things we've been able to do is assess the city by planning zones. We roughly made our planning zones based on census tracts. That's worked really well, especially in growth planning. Our eastern zone, if you look at some of the heat maps that emergency reporting has, you can see you can narrow things down by incident type, and you can see the heat map in that area specifically light up based on incidents. The Beltway coming around Orlando just recently opened up about 6 months ago, and so when you're able to narrow things down by even vehicle accidents, with all the road construction, you can see that type of stuff. So that's been a really big help in for Category 2A in assessing the area by planning zones. One of the other things that Category 2 has us do is have a risk assessment methodology. So within the division section of emergency reporting, they use the OVAP scores, the Occupancy Vulnerability Assessment Profile. That's been really nice for us. We just have one fire inspector. We have a lot of businesses. We're one of those small town USAs with a lot of commercial areas. So we send the crews out to do pre-fire plans twice a year and update the OVAP scores. The methodologies have us just type in a couple of checky boxes. We can pull really relevant reports from that, anywhere from needed fire flow to OVAP scores. We use the OVAP score for our downtown area, which again, were built in the early 1900s, late 1800s. A lot of it's heavy timber, unprotected structures. So that was a big thing. As you can see on the screen right now, we have 628 moderate risk structures and 59 significant. And so those 59, primarily in the central zone, as you see on your screen, are our downtown. So that was really useful for our downtown station. It traditionally has just been a single engine station. This past December, we got a SAFER grant for hiring 12 firefighters to place a tower truck, a truck company in service. So that stuff there with OVAP scores has been really beneficial for us. And then moving down a little bit into the risk assessment categorization was the OVAP score. And then 2C under Category 2 is our current deployment and performance. That just kind of wants you to, again, to assess how you've been doing, and then focusing a little bit on 2D, plan for monitoring and improving performance. One of the things, Tom, if you want to share my screen a little bit, one of the really cool reports, forgive me here. Yep. Which screen? Do you guys see my report, or do you guys see just my blank desktop?
Desktop.
Okay. Give me just a second here. So one of the things we do is, again, we only run 4,600 calls a year, and we're a pretty slow department. But one of the really cool things, especially as a new accreditation guy, that I was kind of, I felt overwhelmed with initially, and I just started digging around in emergency reporting, was how to report on a regular basis. So we report first due performance quarterly for travel time and turnout time. So I was digging around in emergency reporting and found a couple of really great reports of how we can measure first due performance really well. One of the things that, just due to lack of a statistically significant amount of call volumes, being a small town, and a heavy reliance on automatic aid, and an antiquated CAD, is getting that data from other departments. I, like a lot of probably new accreditation managers from smaller departments with older CADs, I spent weeks and weeks pulling raw data from the CAD to make our performance tables. So we're, again, fortunate enough to have a lot of community support, and within the next month we're going live with a new CAD, so that'll help with us getting a lot of data. Again, all 14 departments in the county use emergency reporting, so we're going to be able to pull that data really well. So Tom, you said you can see our screen, or my screen?
Perfect, yes.
Pretty well. So this is just one of the compliance reports that I have for turnout times. So you can see, again, we're a really young department. Almost 20 of the 36 guys on shift have less than a year of experience on with our department, just because we've seen so much growth, and that's not abnormal for a lot of Central Florida departments. So what I'm able to do is break down apparatus compliance for response modes by crews, and then again by risk types. And when I found this, I told Tom at FDIC a couple of years ago, this was one of the coolest things I saw, is again having methodologies for how we're going to measure stuff is, and this is relevant for more than one report. I'm just going to show you for our turnout times and travel times, is we're able to take our EMS, fire, hazmat, and tech rescue, so the way we make our performance tables, and I'm able to break those out into call types. And there's some other reports that I can do that breaks it up into incident types based on NIFRS coding, how we coded the report, and the occupancy type. So if I had a high-risk structure fire in a multifamily residence, I can pull reports on that. But and I'll show you real quick. Let's say high-risk fires. I'm sorry. We can build this out. I'll show you how I built it out a little bit. Is I was able to input all of the NIFRS codes to what I want to consider for whatever risk classification that is. Again, I considered us high-risk fires because we're a smaller community. We only have 3 units in service, and to us, even a single family residential fire depletes the entire city plus several other area fire stations. And I also broke down for turnout time compliance. We basically, our methodology for turnout time is either you're putting your bunker gear on or you're not. So when I measure turnout time compliance, I was able to plug all of the, so right here for 1 minute turnout times, these are all the NIFRS codes that don't require bunker gear. And then for minute and 30-second turnout times, I don't know why that's doing that. But excuse me for that. But for 1 minute turnout times, and then minute 30 turnout times are for all calls regarding bunker gear. So there's a lot of really good reports here that I can pull. And then this is an example of one of our my quarterly reports that I pull. I obviously put it in just an Excel document so it's easier to see for people, but we publish this at our officers meetings. So I'm able to break these down by travel time, by quarter, and by crew. 1 minute turnout time by quarter and by crew, so engine 34A shift, tower 34A shift, and then minute and a half turnout time by quarter, and then again by crew.
I think
so this has really helped. Oh,
I
go
think
ahead,
it's
Tom.
worth noting. I think it's worth noting. Go back to that. Because I think the work you've been doing, if you look at the orange to blue there's substantial improvements on the percent compliance.
Right. And so I expected to see for previous years, and again, hiring so many new people, getting them trained. I really literally have lieutenants outside doing go drills with their crews. We have so many new people, getting them into the swing of what's expected of them. And so obviously we have pretty poor compliance, but we've able to, specifically like these turnout times, you can tell that certain crews have been training with their guys, certain officers have been training with their guys on turnout times. I mean, look at engine 34C shift, and I've seen them out there. So I can pinpoint by crew and officer and say, hey, C shift has really been training on getting their guys in their bunker gear and getting to the trucks real fast. So we've seen marked improvements there.
And that's one of the keys with accreditation, is that you don't have to be perfect. You just have to show a plan and a methodology for improving, and then how you're improving. And what you're showing here is demonstrating that. I think we'll have to talk to Cindy about fast tracking you guys.
Yeah, I wish. If any of my peer team's listening, I hope so. That'd be great. But and then just lastly, I wanted to go. This is just how I broke down our different planning zones. And again, being a small city, we just have 4 planning zones, and then I was able to quickly break down Category 2 in my standards of cover, even for our neighboring jurisdictions. And I'll get to that in just a second. But just scrolling through, I was able to make a quick graph based on OVAP scores. So northeast part of town is just mostly subdivisions and residential, so there's not too much risk there. And I was able to break down total losses and pre-incident values, and then major incident types by planning zone. And so I found this really pretty quick to do, which is very nice, because I know a lot of us can be overwhelmed by Category 2. And then here on this last page, like I said, we provide and receive a lot of automatic aid. And one of the things with us providing automatic and closest aid is we run a lot of calls into other cities, especially one of our fire stations that's on the outskirts. It runs, when I pulled the unit reliability and resiliency, I was appalled at how much we're running into other cities. But one of our policies, again, through accreditation, is just monitoring that and understanding that in our policy, when we do our annual assessment for Category 10, external agency agreements, and that we understand that we're running, Engine 35 is running about 1,000 calls a year to our 3 neighboring jurisdictions, but we're going to maintain those agreements because those cities help us get our effective response here. And without them, we would otherwise not have one. So that's been a big help for us. And other than that, unless you have any questions, that completes my end.
Nice job, Rich. Clearly the chief has picked the right person to be the accreditation manager in your organization. And I'd like to note too that Rich is a lieutenant. You don't have to be a chief officer to do a great job with this. And it sounds like the chief is pretty wise in delegating this to you, and then when you're working with your team at Mount Dora to be as successful as possible. So it's not always rank-based leadership. You've got some gifts here in what you're doing, and clearly are being successful. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Well, thank you very much, Tom.
Of course. Go ahead and pass the screen back to me if you would.
If you could just show me how to do that.
Okay, it should. And yep, and now it's just going to hopefully come back to me here momentarily. So stand by, everyone. Cindy, you may have, because of control, you may just have to send it back to me as the organizer.
I think I just sent it back to you, Tom.
Yep, you did. Can you see your last slide?
Yeah, that was my last slide.
Okay, you can see that, the blue one, everybody?
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Okay, perfect. All right, so next up, we're going to take a little trip a little to the west, to the great state of Georgia, and we've got Battalion Chief Greg Owens. He is an EMTI, their Chief of Technology, 30 years of experience, and is also on the GSAR TF2, the Task Force 2 team. Yeah. Greg, welcome.
All right. I'm here. I'll go ahead and tell everybody in location of where I'm at. Thomasville, Georgia. We're actually 35 miles north of Tallahassee, Florida. So we use that as our landmark because we're down in the southwest corner of Georgia. And as you see on the screen here, we have about 18,500 people, 19.8 square miles, 5,700 incidents in 2018, 43 career personnel, a $3.8 million budget. And we have 2 stations of our own ownership, and then we run a responding unit from a county station. So that's the history of our department, about the same size as Mount Dora as I look at. We're just probably not growing as rapidly as they are. So it's good that I looked at this, because what I took here to utilize is ISO. The other guys took it accreditation, and Tom asked me to do something, so and I picked ISO to show you how we used emergency reporting to help our ISO accreditation. Well, the first thing we did is we run a heat map for our instance in 2014. We actually started using a small portion of emergency reporting in 2013 and then totally transferred beginning in year 2014. So what we did is we took our building fires and we created a heat map to find out where our problem was with our building fires. Then we transferred that data over into a ARC map in our emergency response zones. We began to attend all community events. We passed out safety information and utilized sign-up sheets for free smoke alarms. So in 2014, we experienced 32 building fires. And if you notice the hot locations of the building fires and fire zones, the total number was, like I said again, in 2014 was 32. And if you go to the next slide, Tom, and then you can see we had a little bit of movement in our areas we had targeted, that we were actually in our trend kind of drifted a little bit from the areas we targeted. So then we found out our efforts were actually good, but now we just have to go back and target the areas and where it moved to. So we reduced our fires 32% from 2014 to 2017. We went from a total of 32 fires to 20 fires. And then our heat map also, again, the concentration, and then we plotted them on ARC map and using our fire demand zones. So in that area, we got points for our community risk reduction. And then if you'll move to the next slide, Tom, we also, as the chief, or not the chief, the lieutenant from Mount Dora, using the OVAP scores, that we're fortunate enough that our department, we have 18 certified inspectors. One of the reasons for that is to be an officer in our department, you have to be an inspector. So we utilize 18 inspectors, and we have our city broken up into 18 districts. As it says in ISO, each company officer should be familiar with their occupancy in their jurisdiction. So our inspectors actually carry the inspections for 2 years, then they change. So they're not continuously inspecting the same buildings. Every 2 years it rotates, and they get to see different buildings and get familiarity, and the companies go along with them on their inspections. So that's how we utilize that. And like I said, we got just a little bit of community risk reduction here. Plots our buildings for us nicely. And what we're working towards now is we're even trying to lower these scores. Also, as the lieutenant said with Mount Dora, we're an old turn of the century town, historic area. We have a lot of issues, heavy timber, no sprinkler systems. So what we're doing now, we're trying to go in downtown and even lower these scores more, try to get all our buildings to the green. We only have one building downtown that actually has a red score, and it's due to the fact it has no sprinkler alarm or monitor alarm. So we're trying to work with them to get it to lower their score. So that's how we use that on the OVAP score. So if you'll go to the next slide, Tom.
And just to mention to our viewers, everybody, the color coding, I don't have the legend up, but the green and the blues are the lowest risks, then the yellow creeps up a little bit, and then the orange and red are the highest risk buildings. And so you probably all figured that out, but I just wanted to mention that you can see Greg has illustrated the concentration of the higher risk structures here, and then it helps him and his department concentrate their education, engineering, and enforcement efforts in that area to hopefully get those into a better risk category.
That's correct. Okay, if you'll go on to the next slide. This just looks at our hydrant locations. We do use the Vision and the Google Earth maps on emergency reporting, which is very helpful. And actually, this slide here is, everybody's familiar with ISO. They ask about your batch hydrant report. Well, the city of Thomasville is unique because we own all the water system, all the electricity, all the telephone, all the internet service provider, the garbage. You can go to our city offices, and you can write one check to pay for every service in the city of Thomasville. So since we have just very few private hydrants in some apartment complexes, I created a batch hydrant file for ownership. So I know where my batch hydrants are. So we maintain a focus on those hydrants also to at least test them every other year, not every 5 years. So whenever ISO comes in, we can say, well, here's our batch hydrant list, and this is what we've done for the last 5 years. We have 2 to 3 years of data every time they come in and ask. So that's just showing my batch hydrant locations is what that's indicating. Okay, you want to go
Excellent.
to the next slide? This last slide is where we took we were graded an ISO in 2017, and we received 5.28 points out of 5.5 for community risk reduction. They actually utilized the OVAP scoring for part of that, our prevention, the way we did our prevention, targeting the areas that we had fires in. And they ask a question of what percentage of your community is targeted for, or what percentage of your community do y'all reach out to for fire prevention? We told them 100%. And they asked us, well, how did you reach out and get 100% of your total population for fire prevention? It's like I said earlier, the city of Thomasville owns all its utilities. So the first year, what we did is we actually put an insert in the electric bill. So everyone that received an electric bill from the city of Thomasville received a insert concerning smoke detectors where they could call a number to sign up. If they want to just go online and log in and request a inspection, we would come out and do an inspection. So they were pretty impressed with that we could, definitely say that we reached 100% of the structures that had electricity in it. So that's one way that we did, and they, like I said, helped us move up on our ISO. So if you want to go, our 4-year report is online with the link there. We have a community risk reduction and the 2017 report if you want to go in, which most all the maps were made through emergency reporting that just were inserted in this report. And that's about all I have, Tom, unless anybody has any questions.
No, that was fantastic. Thank you. And I'm glad you mentioned that billing insert to be able to reach so much of your community that way. I think it's a clever idea, and you have the good fortune that you have the integration with the utilities to be able to do that.
Yep.
When you shared that with me, I was like, oh yeah, you got to tell people about that, because maybe the different municipalities out there, they could find a way to do that. And I'm certain that there's an element of accreditation that would apply to, and you can see here their success in maxing out 2 out of the 3 subsections for community risk reduction in ISO. So I congratulate you guys. Nice job.
And one thing I want to say, going back to the insert, is the first year was an insert and it was pretty expensive. So this year we're just putting a tagline on the utility bill.
Oh, so it's going to be printed out on the utility bill itself.
That is correct. Yes. This year it will be.
Nice. So what will it say this year?
Oh, I have that somewhere.
I put you on the spot. Sorry.
Yeah, I've got it right here. Hold on one second.
No rush. So while you're checking, I'm just going to make sure. Cindy, do we have any questions that need to be addressed right now?
Okay, here's our tagline this year's not every hero wears a cape. Be a hero in your home today by scheduling a free smoke alarm installation with Thomasville Fire Rescue. Smoke alarms are crucial when it comes to saving lives and homes. Did you know a typical home fire, you may only have as little as 1 or 2 minutes to escape once the alarm sounds? Protect your family today by calling the number and scheduling for your free smoke alarm installation.
And anybody can do that. It doesn't have to be need-based. If I called you up and said, "Hey, come on over and do some,"
doesn't have to be need-based. The only people we kind of exempt are landlords of apartments. If the landlord calls and says, "Hey, I have an apartment over here, a duplex. I want you to go install 2 smoke detectors," we won't actually do that. It has to, because it has to meet code. But now if the resident of that apartment calls and said, hey, I need a smoke detector in my apartment, we'll go do that. So it's kind
Excellent.
of, you know, here's the thing that I try to tell everybody in my department. If somebody calls for a smoke alarm, I don't want to be on the front page of the paper by not going and installing a smoke alarm and somebody gets injured or killed overnight. So we try to make means to, if somebody calls, we install a smoke detector.
Outstanding. Well, thanks for sharing all of that with us, Greg, and I'm grateful for you to take the time to do this with us today.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so next up is Fire Chief Mike Pritchard of the United States Marine Corps Fire and Emergency Services. Mike has many achievements, but he's very modest about those, and so I wasn't able to pry out a lot from him. But I have worked with him for many years. I have visited almost, I don't know, not all, but almost all of the Marine Corps sites during my time with emergency reporting, and I'm continually impressed with the ship that he runs and the caliber of personnel and services that they provide to the Marine Corps bases around the world. So with that, Mike's joining us via phone, and he's got the slide deck in front of him as well, and he'll just let me know when he's ready for me to advance. And Mike, I'm going to go to the first one where it shows all 14 sites. So take it away.
All right. Thanks, Tom. Thanks for inviting me to join in on the call, and appreciate having some time to share some of our experiences. As Tom said, we've been using emergency reporting now for, it's been about over 10 years. And we've got,
that's right.
Yeah, since 2009. So we've got 14 fire departments. And if you want, you can switch to that next slide, Tom, so go over that.
Okay. Yep, I'm on it.
Yeah, so Marine Corps' got 14 fire departments, and we've been really pushing the accreditation model. We feel like it's really important, and it has really helped us with resourcing and with just continuously improving what we do. So of the 14 departments that we have, we've got 11 that are accredited. We've got a couple more now that are working. One's in candidate status, and the other two are working on getting to that status as well. We've got about 1,130 personnel, 50 fire stations across those 14 departments. We do provide paramedic level care in the United States. We do. We're still at a BLS level for our two Japan departments that we have, but we do ALS and transport for the 12 departments that we have in the United States. Overall, we run about 25,000 incidents a year. Our non-labor budget's about $12 million. You got my contact information there, and you can switch to the next slide if you would, Tom.
Okay.
So Tom asked me to provide a specific example of how we've used data to help with accreditation from a headquarters perspective, and maybe even kind of help, how that helped secure funding. So we've got a lot of agencies, like I said, 11 of those are accredited. So the first thing that kind of popped into my mind was one example from Barstow. Barstow was the first agency from Marine Corps to get accredited, and that was in 2010. And if you kind of picture on a map a line between Las Vegas and Los Angeles, and somewhere right in the middle there in the desert, that's pretty close to where Barstow is. They're kind of out, with not a lot around them. They do have the city of Barstow there, and they do make a lot of calls on the interstate that's nearby, and they do make a lot of, calls close to the installation because of that. So one of the things that they had going on was their installation. One of the fire demand zones was inaccessible because of a railroad track, and the only way to really get to that area quickly was under a small tunnel that went under the railroad track. And so as they went through accreditation and they started running all their numbers, and Tom, you can go to the next slide. So for DODI, for Department of Defense, there's a Department of Defense instruction that is specific to fire and emergency services, and it provides minimum levels of service. So as you're going through and doing your accreditation documents, those of you that's gone through accreditation know, that you have to put together standards of coverage documents, and you have to show what level of service you're providing. So same with the DoD folks and Marine Corps. So this is kind of our DoD-wide minimum level of service operations that we're supposed to be providing. So as Barstow started to look at their response times and take the data from emergency reporting and start to be able to figure out, how long it was taking them to get to these different incidents, they realized that this area that I was talking about that was, divided by this railroad track was a problem area for them, and that they really weren't meeting the criteria because of that. And they had, they could get there in like a utility vehicle or a mini pumper, but they weren't able to get their normal pumper, their Type 1 pumper through this culvert. Basically, it's a roadway that goes under the railroad track. So, when they came out, and Tom mentioned it before, it's not about being perfect when you're going through accreditation. It's about, finding out where your problems are and then describing how you're addressing those. And so for Barstow, they would send one or two folks in a utility vehicle through the cul-de-sac, and they were able to do, some things, but they weren't able to do everything that they needed to do, and they weren't able to meet their full response criteria. So they had a strategic recommendation from the peer assessment team to try and look at possibly getting a mini pumper that they could use to go through this culvert and get to that other side over there to be able to provide service. And that was something that was a recommendation that was around for a long time, but didn't really gain a lot of traction. There was relatively expensive, cost some money. So when it competed against other priorities, it just didn't seem to get enough traction to get funding. But one has been, like, I guess it was last year, because it had been documented, and because it was something that folks were aware of. When there was money that became available, there was some safety money that became available to address some safety issues in this particular requirement for the mini pumper was discussed, and there was funding that was available and was provided to be able to get that mini pumper. So because of the fact that they were able to document that, the data that they used from emergency reporting and through their accreditation efforts, they were able to get this mini pumper, and it's been delivered, and now they were able to address that strategic recommendation from accreditation. So that's just one of the stories that we have on how accreditation has helped, or how the data has helped through accreditation efforts, and through some of the things that we've been able to do, and how we've been able to get funding because of that. There's a lot of others that are out there. I think that the big value that we see in the data from emergency reporting and how that integrates into our efforts with accreditation is that nobody's perfect, so everybody's going to have strategic recommendations or things that they need to address, but you're not going to really be able to, or it's going to be much harder, I think, to address those things if you're not showing the data behind it and telling that story, especially when you're competing for dollars, with other programs and other priorities. So that's kind of the story on how we've used data to address funding. So I'll leave it at that. I know we've got the next slide there, Tom, on annual report. I'll be happy to talk about that. I know we're getting probably within the last 10 minutes or so of the webinar, so I want to make sure you've got enough time for questions, to answer anybody's questions or make this as interactive as possible.
Excellent. No, that was terrific, Mike. I appreciate that very much. And yes, the next slide, and I actually have your 2018 Fire and Emergency Services Annual Report. I've taken a page 5 as a matter of fact. I have that up on the screen, and that particular page shows the little icons with all of your numbers, total training man hours, fire prevention, NIMS, training, all of the hours that you've spent on training across your 14 sites. And so I know that's not the direct slide in front of you, but I know you know it well. And so I'm glad you mentioned this annual report, because the Marine Corps puts out a particularly strong, I mean, incredibly high quality annual report each year. I've been fortunate to see the last 3 or 4 of them, and each year it keeps getting better and better, both in the quality, it's always been a good quality, but as far as the readability for a non-fire person. So Mike has to, send this up into the civilian DoD leadership, and they need to be able to digest this in a way that they can make sense of it, and Mike can make the case for manning, machines, and more money for his troops out at the various sites. So with that, Mike, if you want to just explain how you're using emergency reporting to help you compile this particularly strong document.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Appreciate the kind words there. Yeah, this is something that we use kind of as a strategic communications document, I guess it'd be the best way to describe it, to tell our story and to try and show what our folks are doing out at the installations. So, we put together this report. Each installation kind of gets to tell a little bit about their story, and then we try and have a theme every year on what the annual report is, and use that kind of as an education piece. And this particular year, the one that Tom's got up was last year, and our theme there was training. So we told the story about how important training was to our fire departments and how much training we do, and that goes to cost, that goes to being able to get folks to that training and get the training to those folks. So being able to provide those number of hours and provide that cost behind that is important to the program, and that's kind of what Tom's got on that one slide that he's showing. I'm looking at the page here. I can't see the slide, but looking at the page, it describes the total hours of training, and this is obviously coming from the emergency reporting training module, and we're collecting that data, and we break it down into these different areas for the training areas that we do. So it's another way that we use data to try and help us with telling our story and being able to provide that information to leadership, so that as we compete for resources, we're providing the best information that we can.
Mike, I'm going to show in just the 1 minute we've got, so we can take some questions. On page 27, where you've got just an example of one of the installations, Paris Island, I've got that up, and then I'm going to go to near the end of the document here in just a second to show them where you're compiling all of the incident statistics to be able to show in a tabular format your agency's performance, each agency, and then what the call volume, and then the historical call volume as well. So from page 27, I went to page 64 and 65 and showing both of those simultaneously here. And so this is an example of data being pulled from emergency reporting to create a pretty powerful document.
Yeah, so on the page 27, like I mentioned, each one of our installations has a page or a couple pages. Page 27 is actually the second page for Paris Island. So you get a kind of a note or a story, I guess, or a write-up from the fire chief on what's going on, what has their department been doing in the last year. They'll also try and theme that towards the theme of the overall report, so kind of focusing on training. So you can see that. You see a picture of Chief Weeder, who's our fire chief out there at Paris Island. Good-looking guy. I'm sure he'll appreciate his picture being up on the screen. And then if you go to 64 and 65, page 64 and 65 on the incident data, this is kind of the summary of the installations and the total incidents, and kind of broken down into the different types by inverse type, basically, and then kind of gives you some idea of what we're doing at each of those installations. And again, the whole idea behind this is just to be able to show we've got 14 departments, and we spend a good amount of money on those departments. Kind of describe what they're doing and tell the story about what's going on there.
Excellent. Mike, thank you very much. Appreciate you sharing all of that and the successes that you're having with the Marine Corps Fire and Emergency Services. And I just want to say it's been a privilege to have worked with you over the years, and also with all of our participants today. And so as we close, I want to put up here on the screen, on the first slide, you've got Darren's and Rich's contact information. I'm certain they'd be more than willing to share their processes and their successes with anyone who would like to seek more information. And then we've got Chief Owens and Chief Pritchard's information here as well. And again, I just want to express my gratitude to all four of them for taking time out of their busy schedules to participate in the CPSE webinar today, and that we've got more to come, and we look forward to seeing you all March at the CPSE Excellence Conference. And with that, Cindy, do we have any questions? All right, I'm not seeing any in the questions section, so I'll hang tight for a couple minutes. Again, Rich, Greg, Darren, and Mike, thank you once again. I consider myself privileged to know you both professionally and to call you all friends. And I also want to thank Connie and Andrea at our home office for participating today and being on the ready to answer any phone call or any questions. So I'll stay on for a couple seconds. I know Cindy will close this out. And everyone, thank you again. Have a excellent Thursday and a safe upcoming weekend. And if you need to learn more about emergency reporting, you can see my contact information on the previous slide. And then, of course, it's as simple as navigating to emergencyreporting.com on the web. Oh, looks like we might have a question. Andrea, thank you for posting that. So those of you still on, just click on the link there and it'll take you to our site. All right, take care, everybody. Thank you so much.